Yes, it is true. The Killer Queen has arrived in etc. and now we can all do the JoJo poses together. So Alina, in case you don't know, is basically a character straight out of JoJo. She is about as wacky and over the top as any JoJo character, and she does the poses. In fact, she straight up does the actual Killer Queen pose in her Holy Alina form, which isn't here yet, but some point in the future will be. For now though, we have the base version of Alina, which is the 9 Phases Kyoku for her, which is a Void Breaker, which is kind of weird because she's very much known for poisons, and in Manga Record she did a lot of poison and then did bonus damage if the enemy was poisoned. So you would think that also when her lore is all about her spreading poison through her doppel as well and having really intoxicating art, literally, that she would also be a poison focused character, and poison is forest, right? Would make sense. But for some reason, the developers decided, nah, World Breaker is what it is. And that also means that now Nemu is retroactively a lot worse, at least until we get a Forest DPS. But now we have to actually ask the question, okay, she's a Void Breaker, let's just accept that fact. Is she actually good? Is a Void Breaker Alina actually good? Yes, actually, she's actually really, really good. One of the best breakers in the game right now next to Pluvia, so that's, yeah, let's take a look. Let's take a look. So in order to understand what Alina actually does as a breaker, we need to understand her ability, because that's where everything is going to originate from. So she starts the battle with 0 magic and she can get up to 20 magic. So already we can see, oh yeah, we have another character with a magic system. I actually like magic systems, I think they're really cool, and this character especially has a really cool magic system. So how do we get magic stacks? Because 20 is a lot. How do we get there? So whenever an ally has a follow-up attack, a counter attack, or an assist, you gain 1 magic. Now, assists are not actually on any playable character yet, so there's not actually a single playable character that has an assist, but I assume from what we can see, and I think from one enemy in the game that has this, an assist is like some sort of conditional effect similar to a follow-up attack or counter attack that triggers at some time depending on what the condition is, but instead of attacking the enemy, it does something helpful. Like I've given the example multiple times in the past, but let's say for example you have a healer that has as a passive an assist where when someone on your team drops below 50% HP, they then automatically do an assist where they throw an emergency heal passively onto that character as like an assist. So it's kind of like a follow-up attack, but with like a follow-up heal, it would be an assist, right? Something like that. So whenever that happens, any of these happen, you gain 1 magic. Right now, only Sayaka, by the way, has counterattack. So there's no character that has an assist, only one character has a counterattack, but there's a lot of characters that have follow-up attacks, including Alina herself, as we'll see. So that's how you gain magic. Now, if you have at least 1 magic, which will basically be all the time, because as soon as you get your first turn, you're going to get your magic from your basic attack and skill, you are going to get the following effects. You gain a stacking break bonus percent, up to 140% at 20, and you gain a break gauge depletion buff, which also scales with magic up to 20. So from 1 to 20 you gain more break bonus and more break gauge depletion. Now break gauge depletion, we know about that. It makes the bar empty faster. That's the main thing you want to be doing as a breaker. That's probably the most important thing. And the other thing, that's break bonus. This is not a break effect, right? Break effect is something different. Break bonus is how fast the enemy's multiplier increases once the boss is broken. So let's say the boss is broken, it's at 200% multiplier, for example, and it can go all the way up to, let's say, 500% multiplier. When you hit the boss, of course, you're gonna increase that multiplier. But if you have more break bonus, it increases by even more and goes faster and faster. This is a stat that's basically only for breakers, by the way. Like other characters that aren't breakers don't usually have access to break bonus, and they only do like a tiny amount of percentage with each hit. But breakers increase their numbers by quite a lot, and with break bonus by even more. So it goes all the way up to 140%, which is a lot. So you actually will be able to stack up the percentage on the boss really, really fast with Alina. So already we see that she can both break fast and increase break bonus really fast. So she's already very useful both before breaking and after breaking. Really good. Now, it does say something here with follow-up attacks excluded. So the follow-up attacks, they don't gain extra break bonus, but that's kind of like a small thing. I guess it's not really that important. And then it also sends something down here, whenever the enemy reaches max break bonus, which with your break bonus buffs you get right here is actually really easy, because once Alina hits a broken enemy, that break bonus is going to skyrocket really fast. And once they get to maximum break bonus, you gain 1 SP. So you can also gain a little bit of extra SP for the team, which I haven't noticed that much so far, but it does happen, and you do gain some XP, and it feels good. It feels good having more SP than before. So already, just the passive already looks really good. We're getting some really important effects that make a breaker do even more of what a breaker is supposed to do. We get some bonus SP. We have synergies in here that will make Alina stronger if you have those synergy. Awesome. Now what else does she do? Now I mentioned that both her basic attack and her skill also gives you some magic, which is good. Now the skill is a bit interesting. When you use the skill, you do damage to all enemies, and you automatically gain a follow-up attack, which is kind of weird because it just does it. So you automatically gain a follow-up attack, which does a little bit more damage and applies weaken to the enemies. Now what is weaken? Weaken is the one ailment that so far not a single character in the game could actually apply to an enemy. But now we have the first playable character that can apply it, and it's kind of weird that it's not poison, because like I said, I know it's all about poison. I don't know why poison isn't here. It's kind of weird. But the important part is we now have someone who can apply weaken. And what does weaken do? Weaken is kind of weird because it is an ailment, but it does exactly what debuffs do. So debuffs reduce enemy stats. Well, weaken reduces enemy stats, and what weaken does is it reduces enemy attack by 10% and defense by 10%. So 10% attack down, 10% defense down. Which of course stacks with other normal debuffs, so it's kind of in a weird spot, but 10% attack down, 10% defense down is fine. That's nice. It's like a nice little bonus to have. It is definitely more useful than, for example, having a little bit of a damage over time that ticks for like 1000 damage, because that's basically nothing, right? Or a stun that misses all the time because the enemies have such a high stun resistance. So it's at least an ailment that does something. Even if the thing that it does is kind of little, kind of small, it at least is always helpful and always going to do something good for you, even if it's just a little. And then also gives yourself a little bit of a more extra speed, which is only 10%, not that much, but it's still a decent amount because you're basically going to have this all the time, right? You're always going to be having this for most of the time. I would say actually, because once the boss is broken, you might not be doing skill again. That's maybe like the only point where you don't have the bonus 10% speed from this, but outside of that, you're probably always going to have this. So that's pretty cool. Does it get cooler? Well, let's take a look at the special attack. It deals damage to all enemies, gives a little bit of magic, and then it does the following. When at least 2 enemies are present, gain even more break gauge depletion for this special attack. So the special attack doesn't just do the regular break gauge depletion, it does even a little bit more break gauge depletion for more enemies. And it does that to all enemies, right? So the attack basically powers up if there are more enemies. So the actual break gauge depletion you gain from this is rather small. Basically not noticeable at all, but it's still a nice little bonus. Like they didn't have to add this, but why not? I mean, I'm not gonna say no to that. I'm gonna take that. So the kit already looks extremely solid. You have a really nice ability that allows you to synergize with other people and gain a lot of break bonus, a lot of break gauge depletion. You gain a little bit of extra SP. You can give yourself a follow-up attack that also weakens a little bit and does a little bit more damage, maybe because you have an extra hit in there, even though she's not going to be a DPS or anything. You have a nice speed bonus, you have even more break gauge depletion from here. The fact that you're full AoE means that of course it can break full AoE and you're not having to break enemies individually. Nice. Maybe the support ability is also really good. Let's check. Equipped to Void. Interesting enough, equipped to Void. Not equipped to Breaker, equipped to Void. I think this is the first, or one of the first breakers at least, that is equipped to an element and not Breaker. And the reason why it gets interesting is in a second. So first off, 20% speed, really good. If you want to equip this to a breaker, that 20% speed is going to be extremely important. Like, breakers kind of want that speed, and this is a lot of speed to be giving to another breaker. But also, when at least 2 enemies are present, increase break gauge depletion for each enemy above 2, even more. So basically, the effect from her special attack you gain on your support. So you could theoretically do some really crazy stuff where you take a void character, like maybe a Ren, that attacks really often, and you can just give that Ren extra speed and even more break gauge depletion, which is kind of weird because usually you can't give increased break gauge depletion to someone who isn't a breaker, and I think this might be the first instance where that is actually possible. Not that that's going to be super powerful, that's probably not going to be very powerful at all, but theoretically you could do it, right? But more realistically, if there's like another void breaker you get at some point, you probably would be putting it on there, or you could put this on any other void character that like really lacks speed. So it might not be the best support ability in the game, but it's at least an interesting one that maybe in the future, just the idea of giving break gauge depletion to just any void character might actually get interesting at some point in the future. But for right now, just 20% speed, that's already pretty darn good. So that's it for that. We can also quickly take a look at the Ascension. So for the Ascension 1 and the Ascension 4, same as all the other characters that are 5-star breakers, but the A2, start the battle with 5 magic, and on follow-up attack grants 5 MP. Now, since you always get a follow-up attack on your skill, this might as well just read on skill grant 5 MP. Now the reason why the MP is important is the following. Usually after you've done a special, you end at 5 MP. And then you need to get back to special, and special costs 75 MP, right? So it costs 75 MP. So if you are left with 5 MP after a special, and then you need to get a 75, that means you need to get 70 MP. How much MP does a skill give? 30, which means that after 2 skills, you're at 65, and you're missing 10 MP to get to another special. That kind of sucks. But if you had 10 more MP from 2 skills, which would be 5 MP per skill, you would actually exactly get to another special. So with the 8-2, you can actually do a 2 skill and another special in one rotation, and you don't need any MP bonuses. Of course, if you already have some MP bonuses, let's say for example you have a Kirika on the team, or you have a Mummy on the team who buffs a little with MP bonuses, then you don't need this. But with this, you at least make sure that you don't need to have additional MP gain bonuses. You can just always get that 2-turn rotation, and that's really nice. And starting the battle with 5 magic doesn't really do that much, because you're gonna be getting magic at a decent pace if you have at least 1 or maybe even 2 other characters on the team that are gonna use follow-up attacks. So because you're gonna reach 20 magic decently fast, it doesn't really matter that much if you start at 5, and 5 isn't that much anyway. It's like only 25% of your charges. Really not that big of a deal, to be fair. It might only get interesting in PvP, because in PvP, starting with more resources is always important. So you start with more magic and you do get more MP per follow-up, and you can maybe do some absolutely crazy stuff like Mabayu, giving a double turn to a Alina, and then Alina with the MP and the bonus magic not only immediately gets the special, but also immediately gets to do a lot of break gauge depletion. Awesome, that actually sounds pretty good for PvP, except everyone's using Pluvia in PvP right now for good reason, because Pluvia is kind of overpowered because of her MP bonus, and that kind of gets us to the downer of this entire review, is that Pluvia exists, and Pluvia is also an AoE breaker that breaks decently fast, and the utility that Pluvia brings to the team is the MP refill for everyone on special, which is extremely overpowered and maybe the most overpowered special in the entire game. And I think, I'm gonna be honest, I think Pluvia is way too good for being a released character. I think they should have made the MP restore like 10 MP restore. 20 was too much. And I think the developers are gonna be kicking themselves in the butt for the next few years to come. This is yet another gacha game, and one of the released characters is just obviously way too powerful and shouldn't have released that way. And that's kind of the downer. So if you already have a strong Pluvia, like maybe with multiple ascensions even, maybe you don't actually need Alina, because the MP is just so good, not just for PvP but PvE as well. That said, if we're talking about just break speed, I think Alina is still like the fastest AoE breaker in the game, because not only do you get additional AoE breakage depletion from this, you also gain it from your ability, and I've looked at the numbers. So the ability does the following. It gives 1 break gauge depletion per magic, which means a grand total of 20. Now what does 20 mean in context? Well, the basic attack does about 20 break gauge depletion. So you do 20 plus 20, that's about double break gauge depletion for your basic attack from having maximum magic. The skill does about 60? No, it does about 40. It does about 40, so it does about 50% more break gauge depletion from your skill, and you get to 60 with having 20 magic. And the special attack I think does about 110, so it's maybe like 18% more break gauge depletion for your special, but the special of course also gain a bit more from this, which I think is at 5 enemies plus 15 or something like that. So you can still reach a decent high number for this, and to compare those numbers to a single target breaker, I think a single target breaker generally is about 150 with a single target special, and you almost reach that number from being at 20 magic and having the entire enemy field filled with enemies. Then you'll deal about as much as a single target breaker special to every enemy, by the way. So that's kind of insane. So something else to notice is that this 20 magic of course also gets applied to the follow-up attack. So the follow-up attack actually double dips with that. So everything that I've told you right now about the numbers regarding the skill is just the actual skill itself. But then you double dip with the follow-up attack itself, which by the way, I think the follow-up attack itself only has like 2 or 5 break gauge depletion, like basically nothing. But then it's plus 20. and then suddenly it's a lot. I think we had the same thing with Toka, who just gets a really big multiplier on a follow-up attack, and then suddenly the follow-up attack that before did nothing now actually does a lot of break gauge depletion. So this skill actually becomes extremely good at just eating the enemy break bars really fast. So Alina is one of the fastest breakers in the games, especially at high enemy count, where you can really let that special rip with the increased break gauge depletion to everyone. And yeah, that makes it really fast at breaking. So if we're talking just from a break perspective, because breakers break, in case you didn't know that, so yeah, Pluvia MP might be overpowered, but just as far as break speed goes, Alina is kind of insane and extremely powerful, and that, in my opinion, makes her the second best breaker in the game right now, in my opinion, next to Pluvia. And if you really only care about break speed, especially on void weak enemies, of course, Alina might even be the best breaker in the game. That said, I keep having to reiterate this, Pluvia is kind of overpowered, because I want to make sure that you understand that if you're a free-to-play, for example, and you only have limited rolls, if you already have a Pluvia, is it worth spending rolls on Alina? Maybe not. Especially because there's going to be a new announcement stream that's going to be happening probably next week, and that stream will probably announce the next few characters. I would assume also going to be announcing whatever the next limited character may be. They may be doing a swimsuit character because it's summertime. Who knows? We're going to get some summer characters. So that announcement is going to happen when Alina banner is still up. So you can still decide afterwards if you want to roll for Alina or not. That said, I will also say that Alina is just fun. I mean, it's just a JoJo character. She just keeps JoJo posing all over the place. She's a really fun character, generally just listen to as well. She's kind of crazy. I love that about her. And generally, just having a bunch of follow-up attacks is really fun. And if you want to talk about some additional ways of playing her, I usually don't do this. Let's talk about some team building and some builds you can do with Alina. So generally, the #1 best partner for Alina is not the Magus. So you might be thinking that she released as part of the Magus alongside Toka and Nemu, so maybe it's them. They do follow-up attacks, except their follow-up attacks are way too infrequent. They only do follow-up attacks on special, which is barely ever, and on top of that, Toka's already a breaker. You don't want to have 2 breakers on your team. Like in most cases, that's not going to work, especially when they're different elements, so you would have to use them on a boss that's both weak to fire and void, and it's like, nah, you're not going to do that, okay? Nemu is a buffer for a forest character, so the only way that you would be using Nemu and Alina in the same team would be a void and forest enemy at some point in the future when you have a forest DPS. So not even right now, but only at some point in the future when you have a forest DPS, you then play Alina and Nemu and a forest DPS on an enemy, only if they are both void and forest weak. So you're probably not anytime soon going to be playing Alina together with Nemu. So who's your best partner? It is Ren. Ren is the #1 best partner to use for Alina, because with her ability of her magic skills, where her magic stacks, where if you attack an enemy while they're wounded, you gain stacks, and at max stack she has a follow-up attack. Especially once Ren reaches A2, where she gains double the amount of stacks and has a really easy time hitting her wound on enemies. This makes Ren a follow-up machine, where she does a follow-up attack on basically every single 2 of your character turns. So for example, let's say, for example, Ren does wound, then it's Mami turn, and then it's Kirika turn, that's a follow-up. Then it's Alina turn, that's another follow-up. Then Ren has maybe a special at some point, that's another follow-up. Then Homura and Mami gets a turn, that's another follow-up. Like, it just spams follow-ups really fast, and that gives you so many follow-up attacks for, so many stacks for Alina as well. And keep in mind, when Alina uses her AoE attack that hits on enemies, and if there's wounds on the enemies, you're gonna proc all those wounds. It doesn't matter who on the enemy side has a wound, since it's AoE, it's gonna hit that wound. So then she does a follow-up attack, and the follow-up attack is also gonna hit the wound on the enemy. So that's also guaranteed 2 ways of giving Ren stacks as well. So not only does Alina benefit off of having a Ren on the team, Ren benefits off of having an Alina on the team, because Alina is really good at keep hitting those wounds and giving Ren more follow-up attacks. So those 2, by the way, you're gonna see these on basically every single team. And on top of all of that, they're both void. So if an enemy is void weak, you can just immediately slap both of them on there. So basically every single void weak enemy in the game, you're gonna see these 2 together, and they're gonna be really good. So that's quite interesting that these 2 are so good together, because of course lore-wise they don't have much to do, other than the fact that these are the only 2 characters in the lore that both tried to end their own lives by jumping off a building, and it failed. So I guess there's some connection right there. I guess that's a connection between the 2. So what else are gonna do? So next up, you're gonna have to worry about your support. Now this is actually a point where Toka comes into play, because if you have Toka, you would actually be equipping her. I think Toka is equipped to breaker, not equipped to fire, because Toka is actually really good as a support Kyoku, and on top of that, Tsukuyo is also really good support Kyoku. Both Tsukuyo and Toka are probably the two best breaker support Kyokus right now. I don't have either of them, so sadly I can't use them. Other than that, you can basically use whatever, because all the other ones are not quite as strong as either of those two. Iroha would do well because of break gauge depletion increase. That's pretty nice, gotta get every single bit of that there is. Apart from that, you can maybe do something like 6% attack from here. You can kind of see there's not really anything here. You can get a little bit of speed from Hana, but then you lose out on a lot of stats because you have basically no stats from her. It's really bad if you don't have either Tsukuyo or Toka as your support Kyoku, but at least you can use a Iroha maybe, or yeah, basically just Iroha or not even an Ashley. They kind of all suck, sadly. You don't really have that much of a choice, sadly. As far as portraits go, just speed. Just give it as much speed as possible. Theoretically, you could go for a little bit of MP recovery rate if you're noticing that you're always just a little bit of MP short from getting the next special, but as soon as you have A2, like with Ascension 2, you don't need MP recovery on here anymore, unless you're going for some insane one-turn rotation, and then you definitely are gonna even harder invest everything into speed. So it's probably just going to be speed all the way for your Alina. Now, what other characters do you might want to play, put alongside her, Alina, if you don't have a follow-up character, the follow-up Ren Master, the Master of follow-ups? Well, there's not actually many other 5-stars that I can really see. Sayaka would be a really good choice for your defender, so you would have a Ren right here, for example, if you have her, and then you can still on top of that play a Sayaka, because Sayaka is having a counter attack, so the counter attack helps you with that. And then on top of that, theoretically, Lux has a follow-up attack. I think both Mito and Ashley, I think, have follow-up attacks. No, Seika has counter attacks, follow-up attacks as well. Jeez, I can't talk anymore. So you can kind of go through every single character that you have and just keep looking at which of these characters that I have a follow-up attack and also makes sense. Like I said, Nemu has a follow-up attack, but you kind of can't really make much good use of her, so maybe she's kind of out. Homuda has a follow-up attack, so you can use her as well, but this one is kind of infrequent, like she barely does any follow-up attacks, and they only happen when the enemy is already broken. And when the enemy is already broken, it's probably around the time where you're gonna have around 20 magic anyway, so it's gonna be quite rare that you get to break enemies and you don't have 20 magic yet unless there's like really small adds that break really fast. Then maybe they could be broken and you don't have 20 magic yet, and then Homuda can give you like 1 or 2 more stacks, but that's kind of infrequent. But yeah, it's mainly gonna be Ren as your best character to put next to Alina. Outside of that, even if you don't have a single other character that has follow-up attacks, keep in mind that just her using a skill every single turn is still the 2 magic from a skill plus 1 from a follow-up attack. That's still 3 magic you're gonna get, plus a special is another 3, so you're still gaining magic stacks decently quick, and it's also not the end of the world if you're not getting them that quickly, right? So you don't need to immediately rush to 20, but Ren is gonna get you there immediately. And also, I haven't noticed this, but of course, I have noted this down for you guys, but of course, the magic stacks don't actually go away. Once you have 20, you just have 20 forever. They don't get consumed by anything, you just have them. So that's really good. So yeah, that overall is my review of Alina right here. We're gonna have some good stuff in the future, because at some point we're gonna have Holy Alina, and Holy Alina might actually be a forest attacker. And maybe at some point we're gonna get Holy Mami as well, who could actually be a forest attacker, because then Nemu is not gonna be so sad anymore. But yeah, that was that. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Hit the subscribe button, ring the bell, and I'll see you guys next time.